gone over every summer since I was born. Normally it's a fun, family-filled affair. All of my aunties and uncles and many cousins join us, and we spend a fortnight or so on the beach and enjoying the Mary of Dunglow festival. Back in 2014, my younger sister and younger cousin decided to head over for the festival without our parents. We decided to stay in the house where my granny and my father grew up, an old house hidden from the road and not too far from the town. I had never stayed over in the house before, but had heard a lot of stories from my older sister and my aunties about the house having spirits within it. I wasn't too worried. If there was anything, which I doubted, it would be related to me and wouldn't harm me. On the day we arrived, we were getting ready to go out for our first of many nights of the festival. I felt very uneasy in the house and couldn't put my finger on it. I had been here before many times, when my great auntie and uncle had stayed here before moving to a more modern home on the hill, but now it felt different. As I got dressed and put on my makeup, I felt watched. I can't describe it in any other way than saying I felt as though someone was right at my shoulder, breathing down my neck. I continuously felt like I could see something out of the corner of my eye, but when I turned, there was nothing there. We came home from our night out at about 2 a.m. and had decided for the holiday to all stay in the same room, my sister and cousin in the double bed and me on a mattress beside the chest of drawers. The night was one of the strangest nights of my life. I kept waking up, shivering with cold, then would fall back asleep only to wake later, sweating and overheated. One of the times I woke up, I looked up at the bed and saw that my cousin and sister were both wide awake. In the morning we laughed it off, but throughout the holiday the same thing would happen. We would move around the house, feeling watched. We would wake up at the exact same time every night, and on one occasion I went into the kitchen to find all the chairs pulled out from the table, left askew. I don't know why, but I managed not to be too afraid. I told myself it was an old house, that's why the fire didn't help the cold. The footsteps were just the creaking walls and the feeling of being watched. I must have been over-teared from the bad night's sleep. However, when the festival was over, things took a turn for the worse, and I could no longer convince myself there was nothing going on. One night I woke up, wide awake at 3 a.m. like so many nights before, but this time I heard the sound of whistles. It can't be a tin whistle, I told myself. It's just my sister or cousin breathing. But then it began to move more melodically. A tune. I tried to close my eyes and pretend it wasn't happening until I fell asleep. In the morning, my cousin told me that she had woken up in the night and heard tin whistles. I asked her not to tell my sister. The next night, I woke up again by a noise. It sounded like a saw, or wood against wood, some sort of friction. I turned my head to the chest of drawers close to me and saw the copper handle swinging. Something had been opening and shutting the drawer to wake me up. I was petrified and tried to sleep. Finally, there came a night when I lay my head down on the mattress and felt it move, jolting, as if someone had pushed my mattress with me on it across the way towards the chest of drawers. I sat up and saw how much space there was between me and the chest of drawers, a good few inches. I laid back down and told myself it wasn't happening. A few minutes later, I felt the push again. I sat up and instantly lay back down again. My mattress was pushed right up against the chest of drawers. I felt as though whatever was in the house was isolating me and trying hard to get me to talk about it to my family, but I didn't want to scare them. Finally, it was all too much for me and I booked it to the ferry back home 4 days earlier than I was meant to return. I felt terrible leaving my sister and cousin, but I couldn't stand it anymore. On the last night I spent there, I woke up 3 a.m. in the morning and felt as though there was someone outside my room. I could hear incredibly quiet whispers, almost like a vibration outside the bedroom door, as if two people were discussing something. At this point I was angry. They had ruined my holiday, so instead in my head I said, "If you're going to say something, just say it. Stop whispering." There was silence, and then, very audibly, I hear the word, "girls." I lay there, absolutely terrified, and just a few moments later my cousin woke up. I didn't tell her what had happened. I went home that morning, but weeks later at a big family dinner I was speaking to my cousin, and she revealed, like me, she had experienced a lot of things that she didn't tell me because she didn't want to upset me. We told each other what we had been keeping to ourselves, and our experiences were very similar. My aunties chipped in too and told us frightening stories about the house and the spirits. My cousin and I discovered we had both woken up to the sound of bicycle bells from outside in the lane. She also said she felt as though there was a woman in the house called Nance, but she wasn't related to us. My other cousin then admitted that one night she slept over and saw a woman in her room, standing at the mantelpiece, facing away. My aunties told us that Nance was our great-grandmother's friend who would often visit the house, riding down the lane on her bicycle. It all sounds unbelievable, to be honest. I wouldn't have believed it had it not happened to me. Needless to say, I shall not be staying in the old house this year, or ever again for that matter. I just got home from a 2-night stay in Castle Leslie in Monaghan. I was aware that there was reported hauntings prior to going, but didn't want to read any stories before I went, and my wife was totally unaware of any stories relating to the castle. We stayed in Norman's room and a series of events happened between 1 a.m. and first light, which would have been around 5 or 6 a.m.-ish. The night in question was Monday night to Tuesday morning, the 4th and 5th of April 2016. First, we returned to the room around 12 a.m., and we both were very tired after the drive up from Wexford. I was awoken and could feel a presence in the room, and I could make out the figure of a man sitting in the chair next to the bed. The hair was standing on the back of my neck, and I couldn't move. I then saw what I can only describe as a mist or cloud over the right-hand side of the bed. I had a restless night of dreams. One of those was a dream of being in the bed, and the others which I don't recall. It was very warm in the room, and I was too scared to move or even hang my leg outside the covers. In the morning, my bed confirmed she too had a night of vivid dreams, and awoke to see a cloud of mist at the foot of the bed. No windows in the room were open. I was glad to see the morning and went to the bathroom. Our room overlooked the vast gardens and lake, and whilst looking out over the lake, it looked like a wave or wall of water around 10 feet was moving across very slowly. My wife confirmed the same, but by the time I got my camera to take a picture, it had disappeared. The following night, we told the night porter our experience, and he mentioned that there was reports of the bed being haunted and offered to move us into another room. Nothing like this has happened before, and I would say I was open-minded, yet skeptical. We had a sound sleep on the Tuesday night with the help of a different set of spirits. I can't explain what we saw, but we will return there one day. We just won't be staying in Norman's room. I'm currently 24 years old, but since I can remember, I've always had bad luck and strange things happening to me. I would just like to say my mother told me she had to get a priest to bless her because of an incident with a Ouija board when she was younger. Maybe this thing she conjured had latched onto me somehow. I also had just learned she is seeing the same figure as me. Anyways, I'd like to start with my childhood. I was raised in a violent and abusive environment, which included a lot of trauma on my behalf. My father and best friend committed suicide when I was very young. I believe this thing disguised itself as my father once and showed itself to me also. I do believe that demons, or whatever they are attracted to broken people and the such, from what I have read. When I was around 12 or so, I was very much into occult things and had a lot of occult symbols all over my room, and I had practiced a few rituals, stupidly enough. One night I was awoke by a dark shadow figure standing at the bottom of my bed, and it was trying to pull away my blanket. I couldn't do anything about it. I felt completely powerless to it. This has been happening to me ever since. It has appeared as a couple. It has appeared just at my door, reaching around from behind it, opening it slowly. I also heard unexplainable scratching in my built-in wardrobe. When I checked, there were scratch marks all over the inside of the door, like claw marks or fingernails, and they were deep. Ever since that night, I have struggled with addictions and a voice in my head that takes over sometimes, urging me to do bad things. It has been really bad these past few weeks. I have also become on and off depressed. This figure has never left. Every so often it will appear again over the years here and there, but not until around this time last year. I had a bad breakup with my partner of 8 years. I got depressed again and got into the occult once more. I stupidly was present when someone summoned a demon, and during this I was in an extremely bad place. Then all of a sudden this same shadow I seen when I was younger would appear every single night. I was sleeping on the sofa for a good month and it would appear over the top of me on the wall. It would appear on the walls opposite me. Even when I got to lie down on the bed, it would still be there, standing over me. The feeling that someone was there was really immense when I would stay up all night. The strange noises would come back and electrical appliances would turn off and on. They wouldn't even be plugged in. I couldn't explain it whatsoever. Ever since this, I've had lots of bad luck, i.e. I've lost nearly every job I've had due to circumstances I can't control, leading to financial issues. I've been extremely depressed and even have had suicidal thoughts which have been very prominent this past while. I've lost loved ones. My addictions are really bad now. I've had multiple injuries, and I've changed from a very nice outgoing guy to a very quiet kind of loner type, and I've become a very angry person inside. I've signed myself in for some counseling because whatever this thing is, it's winning, and it's making my life unbearable. I do believe it's been with me on and off since I was a child. I just think it makes itself extremely known when I'm at my weakest moments. I thought I would submit this so I could see what other people say and think. Thank you ahead of time. My story began a long time ago. I have always picked up on things others have not. For a few years, the haunting I had experienced seemed to have stopped. However, in the last couple of months, things have started again. It started shortly after I began university. I'm staying with a relative in a very old house that was built in the late 19th century. From the second I moved in, I felt slightly uneasy in my room despite there being plenty of religious objects in the room. I began to wake up in the middle of the night, and I would see a tall, hooded figure with red eyes standing at the foot of my bed in front of the wardrobe. I brushed it off as my imagination. Since then, things have only gotten worse. I constantly feel like I'm being watched. Things around my bedroom move unexplainably. For over a month now, I have been unable to sleep. I'm lucky if I get to sleep before 4 in the morning, but when I do, I have vivid and horrific nightmares and can feel something breathing on me during the night. As I desperately try to fall asleep at night, I often get so scared I have to keep the light on. I hear tapping coming from inside my wardrobe and footsteps in my room when I'm all alone. A couple of weeks ago, I went to visit my grandmother's grave when it was near dark and very foggy. I felt very scared, which was very strange as I usually get peace from being at the grave. As I was leaving, I cut through the middle of the graveyard when I noticed something very odd. I saw 3 hooded shapes moving very quickly up the graveyard aisle. At first I thought they were teenagers on bikes, but I was very close to where they were and I heard absolutely no noise. They were completely silent. Needless to say, I was very spooked by this and got out of there very quickly. Since this had started happening, I have not felt like myself. I don't feel normal. The only thing I am confident in is that this entity that has invaded my life is not a good one. I don't like not being able to feel safe in my own room. I hate feeling it watching me, especially at night when things are at its peak. Is it possible that this thing that is following me is a demon? I would really like some advice on this. I don't know what to do. I have always been interested in the paranormal and ghosts, but I had never really thought that I would have my own experience. In January of this year, I experienced a rather unsettling occurrence in the house that I rented at the time with my best friend. It was a renovated house, but would have dated back to around the 1950s, maybe a little bit earlier. Myself and my friend Rachel were quite happy with this house. I did experience some strange feelings of unease in my bedroom over the year I was there, and always oddly felt it coming from the same corner of my room. I have to admit I spent many a night with my bedside lamp on, but one event in particular still makes me feel uneasy. One evening I was standing in the kitchen. Our living room and kitchen were one room. My bedroom was the only other room on the ground floor, and the door that led into the living room kitchen was beside the stairs. I've been making myself some tea, and from the corner of my eye, seen Rachel come into the room. I turned to ask her if she wanted anything, and was more than a little shocked to find she wasn't there. I thought she was playing games with me, so went to check my room and the stairs, which would have taken me a few seconds. If anyone was running or hiding, they wouldn't have a lot of time to do so. She wasn't there. I was convinced I had seen her. I was even half expecting her to still laugh, and yet nothing. I called her mobile phone only to hear it ringing from her room, upstairs and down a little hallway, where she answered it sleepily and wondered what was going on. I explained what had happened, and of course she thought I was just trying to wind her up. I wasn't. I told her I was serious, and of course that made us both freak out a little. Not really a little, a lot. I know that people say, oh, it was just your eyes or mind playing tricks on you, but something about this seemed different. I was convinced she was there, and when she disappeared, my stomach sort of dropped because I think I sensed something wasn't quite right. After the experience in the kitchen, Rachel told me that she experienced sleep paralysis more in this house than she had in our previous two properties combined. She had suffered from sleep paralysis since her early teens, and in various quite unsettling ways. Now, I know most people would say that she could just be saying this to go along with the story, but Rachel is not that kind of person. She is logical and incredibly level-headed. To think something strangely paranormal and unexplained is happening to her in equal measures scares and annoys her because she can't find a logical explanation for it. I feel that our house may have been haunted not by something angry and malevolent, but someone who was a little unsettled at us being there, and so we felt unsettled and uneasy being there at times ourselves. I wouldn't outright claim that I have seen a ghost, because I genuinely don't know, but I have read about people claiming ghosts taking the shapes of their loved ones and friends, and thought maybe this could have been the same thing. So this has taken place since I was born. When I was a few weeks old, orbs and vortexes started showing up all around me. Then when I was only 2 years old, I saw my first ghost. It really scared me, and I can still remember it. Then we moved to a new house. The activity stopped for a few years, but then when I was about 8 years old, I started seeing ghosts again. I saw a shadow ghost of a woman in a graveyard, and she was staring at me, but I wasn't scared of her. Nothing really happened after that until I was about 12 years old when a ghost of a little boy showed up at my house. My room was being done up so there were no curtains up and you could see outside. I had just gotten into bed when I turned over and looked at the window, and there was a little boy staring in the window at me. It scared me. I pulled the covers over my head and hoped he would go away. I fell asleep, but I woke up when my parents came into my room to hang up the curtains. I slowly looked over at my window, and the little boy was gone. I quickly looked around my room just to make sure he wasn't there, and he was gone. When I turned 16, ghosts started showing up again. I would hear whispering and things being moved around. One night I was in the sitting room alone when suddenly I could feel a presence in the room with me. I felt like I was being watched. Then it threw my jumper from one corner of the couch over to the other side of the couch. I was scared, but I wouldn't turn around to see what was there. Soon after that, the presence left the room. Things started getting really weird now. I was lying on my bed after coming home from school when I suddenly felt a hand on my waist. I felt like I was being comforted, but I wasn't afraid, and I had the most vivid dream of this guy and this girl. They were lying on a bed kissing and laughing, but the girl in the dream looked exactly like me, which kind of freaked me out a little. When I woke up, there was nothing there, so I just thought it was my imagination. A few weeks later, the guy that was in my dream showed me how he died in another dream. He died in a car wreck. I jumped up out of bed and I noticed that my head was hurting me. I put my hand up and felt a lump like I hit my head. It really scared me because the guy in my dream died from a head injury. Just recently, a ghost of a woman showed up in our shed. I don't know who she is, but she is still there. Why do ghosts keep showing up at my house? I never told my parents any of this because I don't want to scare them. Has this happened to anyone else? The following is just one of the many supernatural events that I've experienced in recent years while spending time in Ireland. As I am from the inner city area in England, I don't really get a chance to escape the hustle and bustle of city life very often, so I find that when I go to Ireland to visit family and friends, and generally escape, I finally get to unwind and enjoy being out in the countryside, surrounded by nature, and I'm pretty sure that makes me more sensitive to experiencing strange events. It was summer 2012. My then boyfriend, now husband, and I were staying at a house that belonged to a family friend. He had spent a lot of time there as a child, and it is a lovely looking old house overlooking the sea, very dark inside but comfortable, and I didn't feel uneasy overall, but I disliked the bathroom and a lot of the paintings and ornaments oddly placed around the house. For example, there was a statue of the Virgin Mary on top of the wardrobe in the double room which faced the entry to the bedroom, which just seemed odd to me, but each room had religious statues and paintings dotted around in odd arrangements. The arrangements I disliked, not the statues. After our first night there, we awoke to all the doors inside the house open. I noted this as I have a little thing about doors being closed, and I obviously immediately noticed our bedroom door open from waking up that morning. However, on inspection, a lot of the doors were easily unlatched, and I attributed it to being an old house, but it did just give you a spooky feeling. Another day, in the shower, I noticed through the steamed-up glass of the shower barrier what looked like a dark figure standing in front of the window. I wiped the glass to see if my boyfriend was there, but no one was. This really creeped me out as the bathroom was the one room I felt most comfortable in, and now always felt watched and a feeling of dread. Other little things happened, but the one thing that surprised me the most, yet also slightly amused me, was the incident on the second night after the door opening incidents. We were both tired and ready for bed, so I started closing down and noticed the second spare bedroom's door was ajar, and something unusual caught my eye. The two single beds each had a corner of the covers pulled back neatly as if they were being used. They certainly hadn't been like that the day before, and my boyfriend said he hadn't done that, and they were probably like that when we came. No one else had been there in the house the week we were there, and we were responsible for keeping the house whilst there. No cleaner, etc. We went to sleep in the double room and slept soundly. Again in the morning, our bedroom door was open, but what surprised me, and I have to admit, at the time, chilled me instantly, was that the statue of Mary on the wardrobe was staring down at me and not facing the door as she originally was. Without taking my eyes away, I reached for my glasses just to be sure, and sure enough, the statue was indeed facing me. As my boyfriend stirred, I turned and nudged him a bit to wake him up and pointed it out, but as I looked back, it was facing the door again, as if to make me look like a complete idiot. I didn't mention it to my boyfriend until the journey home. He then reeled off a list of things he had seen but didn't want to scare me or talk about while we were there. He had seen the dark figure in the bathroom, and he agreed the sheets in the spare room were not like that when we arrived. He said he had woken to the sound of a man whispering his name 2 nights in a row with no one to be seen. He had a number of items go missing and turn up in their original places later, as I had experienced with a single shoe. Now, he doesn't scare easily, but I'm a wuss at times, and we sat telling our spooky story to his mom a few nights later, and she told of her experiences of the house. It was originally owned by her mother's friend, an elderly woman, and as a child she reports seeing a completely black figure, a man with no face, starting to run toward her one day as she walked up the stony driveway that led to the house on an errand for her mother. She turned and ran back home, and her father marched around, wanting to know what man had scared his daughter, and no one could explain who the mysterious black faceless man was. Although other local people over the years revealed they had seen variations of the same at the house, such as a headless black figure, and another said they had seen a black figure with glowing red eyes. She also said that, in the ways many elderly people in Ireland still are, the household has always been a religious one, and it would not have been acceptable for an unmarried couple to sleep in the same bed as we did. We're both Catholic, and this did make me smile a bit that maybe the statue of the Virgin Mary turned towards me was the disapproval of a resident spirit, similar to the single beds left turned out for us as a hint to adhere to tradition. Creepy still now, but looking back, I didn't feel threatened by those events, just a bit chilled. I think the dark figure is someone separate altogether though, as in the bathroom I've always had the sense of urgency to hurry up and get out. I've since stayed at that house again, maybe a year later, and the door is still open, and I still felt uneasy in the bathroom, but neither of us have seen the dark figure in the bathroom since our first visit. I'm a 25-year-old Australian who traveled around Europe last year with my younger sister, 20 years old, who for this story I will just call Kay. Kay and I had been traveling for 3 months by ourselves with friends for some parts. Kay and I are both interested in the supernatural, so on our adventures we went on a few ghost tours here and there, explored the underground Edinburgh vaults, Paris catacombs, and old, supposedly haunted castles. While all these activities were super fun and educational, we never had one creepy or unexplained experience. The creepy and unexplained didn't come until the last few days of our trip, when we weren't looking for or expecting it. The first experience took place in early morning Dublin, before sunrise. At this stage of the trip, Kay and I were traveling just the two of us, and we were running quite low on money. We had a day trip booked to take us out to see some castles and other sights of Ireland. We had been instructed via email to meet up with our tour group at Dublin train station at 6:30 a.m. Low on money and not wanting to pay for a taxi, Kay and I decided to get up extra early and walk to the train station. According to the concierge at the hotel, it would take us roughly 30 minutes to walk there, so we set off at 5:40 a.m. just to be safe. Being the eldest sibling, I felt responsible for Kay's safety, so I was always very aware of our surroundings. As we were walking in the dark to the train station, the streets were still very quiet at this time of morning. We saw a few people here and there, but not enough to feel completely comfortable, 2 girls walking alone. Kay and I had been walking for about 20 minutes when I noticed the shadow of a person approaching us on the sidewalk. I looked behind me to see if we were dealing with someone friendly or not, but nobody was there, besides a couple walking on the opposite side of the street and in the opposite direction to us. When I turned forward, the third shadow was still there. This time Kay turned around to look behind us, and when turning back she asked me, "Did you just look behind us because of that shadow?" To which I responded, "You see it too?" We weren't freaked out yet. I suggested that it may have just been an optical illusion, like perhaps one of us was creating 2 shadows due to the angle of the sidewalk or something. So we tried to prove that theory by putting our arms straight up in the air and waving them around while watching the 3 shadows. When we did this, only 2 of the shadows copied our movements. The third simply kept walking alongside of ours, casually. Kay and I both began laughing, a nervous kind of laughter. We spent the rest of the walk looking behind us trying to catch something or someone following us, but we never saw anybody, and the shadow walked with us the entire way to the train station until it was too bright to see any of the three shadows anymore. Personally, I'd like to think that perhaps it was a guardian of some sort. Kay and I really should have got a taxi. It wasn't smart for the two of us to be walking around in the dark in this place we barely knew. So maybe the shadow was trying to make sure that we arrived at our destination safely. The second unexplained moment happened a few days later back in London. Kay and I were exhausted and had gone to bed early in our hotel room. We had a single bed each with a small space in between. We were watching a movie on television. I rolled over first and told Kay I was going to sleep. Maybe 5 seconds later, I felt heavy pressure on the end of my bed, just as if someone had sat on it. The bed even dipped and I had to pull my feet up. Assuming it was Kay, I didn't even bother turning over. I just asked her what the hell she was doing. That's when I heard Kay ask from her bed what I was talking about. I spun around and sat up immediately. There was nothing on the end of my bed, and it was clear that Kay had not moved from her position, as the chips she had been eating were still resting on her stomach. I told Kay that someone had totally just sat on my bed, and we both did the nervous laughter again, but I wasn't really scared. Less than 5 minutes later, I rolled over and went to sleep again, with no more occurrences. Safe to say we came back home with a few fun stories to tell. I've had my fair share of spirits around me. I've seen spirits all my life and am somewhat sensitive to them. When I was 16, I believe I was attacked by an incubus. It wasn't until I read some stories on this website did I figure out what really happened to me. This story is true. All of this happened to me. I do believe in ghosts. They do scare me, but they also fascinate me. It all started one night. I had just climbed into bed and was laying on my side ready to go to sleep. I was only lying down for a few seconds when my whole body became paralyzed and I felt really weird and my ears were ringing. I was totally unaware of my surroundings when this was happening to me. I could see this black figure of a man walking towards my bed. My heart started to race and I thought I was going to have a heart attack because my heart was beating so fast. As he came closer, I started to feel really warm and kind of turned on. I was so scared. When he was standing beside me, he started to lift up the blankets and started to touch me. That's when I became really scared. I tried to call for help, but I couldn't. It started to feel me all over, and that's when I blanked out. When I woke up the next morning, I couldn't understand what had happened. I didn't tell anyone and just brushed it off. Sometime later that week, when I tried to fall asleep one night, I heard this man whisper something in my ear. I jumped up and looked around, but no one was there. I don't know what he whispered to me, and I could never make it out. A few weeks later, the whispering returned when I tried to sleep, but I still couldn't hear what the guy was saying. It went away for a while, but then it returned. The whispering continued, but I just ignored it. When I came home from school one day, I felt really sleepy, so I decided to have a nap. As I lay on my bed, I felt something lie beside me and put its arm around my waist. I didn't feel scared at all. I actually felt incredibly safe. I had this really vivid dream about this incredibly hot guy with this girl who looked like me, and we were lying in bed together and he had his arm around my waist. We were laughing and joking and we looked really happy, like we were in love. When I woke up, there was no one there, so I thought it was a friendly ghost and didn't think much of it. I didn't think much of the dream either, as I don't dream that much. Later that week, I was feeling kind of tired, so I decided to have a nap. I was only asleep for a few minutes when I woke up to this feeling of intercourse. I woke up and was feeling drowsy, like I was drugged. I looked around, but nothing was there, and that's when I felt drowsy and fell back asleep. I woke up a few minutes later and felt something kissing me, but I couldn't see anything yet again. I felt really drowsy and fell back to sleep. When I woke up, I thought it was my imagination. The spirit went away for a while but recently came back, but I now know what it is after constantly surfing the internet. I found this website and read a few stories about an incubus, which really fascinates me. I finally learned what was happening to me. The whispering returned at night when I tried to sleep. I started hearing noises in my bedroom like things being moved around and being played with. It really freaked me out, so I started going to bed later than usual, hoping that I could go to bed in peace. Sometimes I would wake up in the morning and still feel tired, like I wasn't getting enough sleep at night. This continued for months until one night I was asleep and was woken up by something. As I opened my eyes, I saw this black figure lying beside me in bed. I couldn't move and I was paralyzed, but I felt really weird like the night that I was first attacked. I could make out some of his features. His eyes were dark, but I couldn't see the whites of his eyes. He had a nose and a mouth and he looked human to me, except that everything about him was black like a demon. He said something to me, but I couldn't make it out. I asked if I could go back to sleep, but he just laughed at me like he was surprised that I wasn't afraid of him. He wanted to hold me, but I said no and he stopped. After that, I fell asleep. I was surprised that my incubus showed himself to me, but I'm not scared of him at all now. When my incubus is in my house, he creates this ticking noise like a clock, only faster, like he is letting me know he is there. He also makes my attic creak like mad when he's around. Sometimes it's really loud that it makes me jump. My incubus is like my protector. He follows me everywhere like he is watching out for me. I like him being around and I don't mind that he follows me. I feel really safe when he's around. He is really sweet and caring and listens to me and has never hurt me. I really care about him as well, and when he leaves for a while I feel like my best friend is missing. He has been with me for 4 years as I am now 20. Now don't tell me that incubus are dangerous and can kill you or I would be dead by now. And don't tell me to get rid of him. I've heard it all before and it really annoys me. My incubus, Andrew, is not dangerous. He is loving and I really care about him. When I was depressed, he made me better. I was happy again thanks to Andrew. I know he will never hurt me. I feel like I've known him before. I don't know where from. He told me I was his girlfriend back in the 1900s and that he wanted to marry me in a past life. What do you think? Could that be possible? For the past 3 or 4 years, I've been experiencing people that are dead. I did experience this when I was younger, but it had stopped for a while. Then it all happened again. On the year I was born, my father's brother named Eugene died in a car crash. Sadly, his ribs and lungs got crushed and died from having no air. I never saw him when I was younger, but around 2006, I started seeing him. Whenever I did see him, he would just be standing there, smiling at me. But one day, something a little different happened. I was sitting in my room with my mom and dad, and we were watching a movie. My uncle Eugene came into the sitting room and sat on the couch beside my father. My dad couldn't see him, but I could. He turned to my father and rubbed his arm. My dad had this shocked expression on his face because he could feel something rubbing his arm. When I saw his face, I told him it was Eugene, but then Eugene started to make me cry because he was mad that I had told my father that it was him. And then later on that night, Eugene came into my room. He wasn't very happy, but I did say sorry, which made him smile. Ever since that day, my uncle has been here and there around me. I always remember seeing him when I'm in certain situations. Sometimes, though, I don't see Eugene. I see shadows. Shadows of people I don't think I know. Sometimes the shadows are very faded, but sometimes they're beside me, and they're very fool-looking. I remember when I was about 8, I saw this small shadow. It looked to be a little boy. I don't ever remember having a little boy in my family die, so I started to get a bit scared. One time I saw the little boy's shadow and my uncle Eugene standing beside each other. Eugene seemed happy when the boy was there, so I thought I should be happy. At night from that day, I've seen the boy's shadow, and I could always feel him sitting on my bed, staring at me. I always thought Eugene sent him there to take care of me when Eugene couldn't, but then things started to change. This little boy was getting into my dreams. He always scared me sometimes for no reason, and I always felt as if though he was trying to warn me. After a year after all these nightmares, my mother's brother, Peter, died. This is when I got the thought of the little boy's warnings. Since Peter died, the little boy never came to see me. I've never seen my Uncle Peter's ghost until his first anniversary of being dead. When I did see him, he was standing behind my mom, and he put his hand over her shoulder. She started to cry and told my grandmother that she could feel him touching her. I went up to her and told him that it was him, but she didn't believe me because I was only young. But then Peter bent down to me and smiled. I remember this because he went to kiss me but didn't because he had seen his two younger sisters and wanted to go beside them. Ever since that day I've seen Peter, and he has always helped me in some way when I wasn't happy or I was in bother. In about 2011 or 12, I started boxing. I started it because my father and his two younger brothers, including Eugene, did it, and seemingly it was in the blood that we were good boxers. Turns out that every time I fought in a club, a coach would go up to my dad and say that I have a special way of fighting. My father was my coach, so he always took pride in these compliments. One day I was fighting in a big tournament. It was an Ulster tournament. Every time before I go to fight, I always pray to my two uncles, Peter and Eugene. When I went up into the ring, I could have sworn I heard my Uncle Eugene, but I never paid attention to it. As the bell went for the first round to start, I remember just freezing in the ring because my Uncle Eugene was in the ring in front of me wearing boxing gloves. I remember him winking at me and then standing beside me. Every time my opponent went to hit, my uncle would do a move and I would copy him. At the end of my 3 rounds, I won my fight thanks to my uncle's advice. Last year in 2013, at around November-December time, my mother took a video of my little brother and sister dancing. In this video, white things started to fly around, and they were in front of the camera. Some were kind of faded while the rest weren't. In this video, my brother and sister go onto their knees and pretend to play guitar. As this was going on, the door behind my brother, which leads into a bathroom, started to open slowly. After about 6 seconds, the door started to close, but I noticed someone in the bathroom moving, which was unusual because it was only my mother and the 2 kids in the room. About a week later or two, my brother sat on my dad's chair facing a painting of my Uncle Eugene. He then said to my mother, "Mommy, I miss Uncle Eugene. He was a very nice man. Will I ever see him again?" Keep in mind, my brother never met Eugene, for he wasn't born at this time. A few minutes later, my brother then said to my mom, "Mommy, I miss him. I'm going to cry." Then he burst into tears. My mother was very scared, for she couldn't understand how he knew Eugene. A few days later, my brother then started taking pictures on his iPod. My father was babysitting him and was reading the newspaper. While he was reading, my brother called him in and said, "Look at the blue Peter I took a picture of." If you don't know what a blue Peter is, then I'll tell you. It's a shadow person. Now, nobody told my brother what a blue Peter was, so we didn't know how he knew this. My father went and looked at the picture my brother wanted to show him. On this picture was a shadow in thin air shaped as a person. My father was very scared, so he showed my mother. Recently in school, I have not been doing very well. But my Uncle Peter had been there for me because my mother told me to pray to him. I thought it was weird to pray to him, but I did it anyway. And within a day, he was there in school with me. Recently, I have been in a fight with a girl. One day at lunch in school, I saw Peter and Eugene together looking at this girl. They both looked angry at her. This is when I knew that my mother was right about praying to them. A few days later, my brother said something, but I didn't know about it until yesterday, when my cousin came up. My brother sat on her knee and said to her, "You see that painting on the wall? That is my Uncle Eugene. He's my daddy's brother. Did you know he died in a car crash because he was drinking and he hit another car?" Me and my mother and dad were really freaked out that he knew this because no one told him how Eugene died. My cousin asked him how he knew this. My brother replied, saying, "The fairies from up above told me." My brother pointed towards the sky when he said this. Then we all caught on that he was talking about angels. Later on that night, we put him in bed. I was sitting with my dad at the dinner table and we started talking about it. My father was upset because since my brother started talking about Eugene, he missed him a lot. He said to me that he would love just to at least see him one more time. At that moment, I was going to tell him I could see him, but I didn't because I knew it just wasn't the right time. As my father was telling me how much he missed Eugene, Eugene was sitting at the table. He was smiling at my father and then turned to me and smiled. He seemed happy that my father was talking about him. That is recently what happened so far in my life with my dead relatives. It would appear that me and my brother have a gift. I had a seasonal job at Target last year. Every year they bring in new people during the seasonal times to help with all of the chaos of the spending season. It's pretty standard. Just about everyone was doing this. It just happened by chance that I was doing it at Target. I think it's actually funny. I don't think I've ever actually been to Target until that job. But anyway, it was actually a night shift position. I would come in and start working at around 4 a.m., and that was one of the crucial times to get stocked up on stuff for the big shopping rush that day. Now, the way we did it was we would get a shipment off of a truck, and all the supplies would go onto the back. We did that as fast as possible so the truck driver could get on with his next stop. Those guys were always in a rush, and once we got the stuff in the back, it was up to our team to get it all organized and stocked. And that was all fine and dandy, pretty standard procedure. Now, there was normally a good number of people who worked this shift with me, normally between 4 and 5 of us, with the manager somewhere else doing whatever else managers do. But here was the situation. The layout of the store was a little weird. We had so much room in the warehouse area for all the supplies, but sometimes it would be too much, like drastically overflowing. And we had this other room to put some of the stuff we just couldn't fit anywhere else. It was a weird situation because that overflow room was not very big. I think it used to be someone's office. I don't know what happened there, and I don't really care either. That was the job. It was a true nightmare to organize the stuff in that overflow room. It was a really tight working space because it would normally be 2 people in there doing that, and the rest of the team would be outside. This room was kind of secluded as well. It was just kind of out of the way and didn't make sense to be a storage spot. Again, not my decision, just what I was told to do. It was one of these early mornings that I had to work in that overflow room with a guy I didn't know that well. He never said very much, and he looked a little sketchy. I'd actually seen him walk off of the premises a few times after getting a text message. That was really weird. It was never for very long either. It was like he got a text message and went outside to take a smoke break or something. No one ever said anything though, so he just continued to do it. Honestly, none of us really cared that much. I didn't mention we came in at 4 in the morning, right? Well, this one morning that we were working in the overflow room, something a little strange happened. He got a text message and went outside like usual. I asked him where he was going, and he just said he'll be right back. He left before I could say anything else, but I noticed he dropped something as he went out. It fell on the floor, and I went over to pick it up. I could tell you exactly what it was, but it looked like a clear Ziploc bag of herbs. Honestly, they probably weren't herbs at all, but being really tired and overworked, I assumed he was a gardener and he was carrying his herbs around. I know, I know how stupid it sounds. I have a lot of friends that are really into gardening, and I guess I just assumed the best case scenario. When he came back, he seemed like he was in a rush. He was looking around frantically. I told him he dropped his herbs. I pointed to them on a table in the room, and that was when he got really aggressive with me. He asked me if I thought it was funny, and that was when it dawned on me that he wasn't walking around with lavender in his pocket all day. It also dawned on me that he was probably selling while he was working this shift. That would explain why he would randomly go outside every once in a while. He threatened to kill me if I said anything to anyone, and I was honestly scared to death. I didn't know what to do. Looking back, I probably should have told my manager and called the police right then, but I never really had to deal with anyone that was a criminal or anything of that sort. Of course, I didn't say anything to anyone, but now every time that I saw him, he gave me a weird look. We'll just call him David for anonymity's sake. And that wasn't his real name, but it'll work. Over the next 2 or 3 weeks, I started to observe David a little more closely. I paid a lot more attention to what he was doing and what he was looking at and how he was behaving. And after that time, I realized a few things about him. Firstly, he was definitely a drug user himself. I couldn't tell you what, but my guess is that it was something pretty hardcore. He would talk to himself like a crazy guy once in a while, and other times he would just completely zone out like he was in a different planet. The other thing that I noticed about him was that he was very unstable. Sometimes he would get really upset over very minor stuff. There was one time he screamed at the top of his lungs because his shoe was untied, and other ridiculous things like that. Now, while all of this was going on, I was still living my life. I still went for runs at the local park, and I made YouTube videos in my free time, just for fun. I tried to forget about the whole situation with David. That was until I saw David at the park where I always ran. He was sitting on the bench staring at me dead on. I stopped mid-step. That was the scariest realization ever, because it meant that he was stalking me, and I didn't know what his intentions were. I didn't know how long he'd been doing it or why. I just knew that I was in danger. I kept running and played it off like I didn't notice him. But oh boy, how could I not? Then there was one morning where it all went down. I showed up a little earlier than usual. I was always on early bird and I just hated being late. I was there about an hour before my shift started. Must have been about 3 or so. I was chilling in the parking lot listening to a podcast on my phone, and that was when I noticed someone pull up behind me. I parked kind of far away from the store to not take up parking for the customers throughout the day. I just thought it was unusual for someone to park so close to me when there were spots everywhere else. My heart sank. The person behind me turned on their brights, and that was when I knew it was David. My fight or flight kicked in. I turned my car off and sprinted to the store as fast as I possibly could. I knew the employee would be open and I would be able to get to safety there. David started driving after me, like trying to run me over. He probably would have gotten to me too, but there was the spot where it was a line of trees in the parking lot. I ran to the other side of the trees when I noticed that he was driving and he couldn't really do anything after that. I got inside and screamed that I needed help. Surprisingly enough, my manager was there. I explained the situation to her and we called the police. She locked the employee entrance and we waited until the police gave us the okay. Obviously, David had booked it. The cops couldn't find him either. He wasn't at his apartment. Apparently he gave the wrong address when he applied to work there. I guess they don't check the seasonal workers very thoroughly at Target. Hopefully they do now. And that was the story of how I almost got messed up working at Target last year, and if you're wondering, I don't plan on applying again this year. Target was my favorite place to go shopping. I'm sad to say I don't think I can never go back there though. Sometimes when you have such a bad experience, it will ruin the love you had for a place or a store altogether, and that's what happened to me. It all started when I graduated college. I was a psychology major and I struggled to find a job. I live in a mid-sized city and there just wasn't anything appealing to me. There weren't any jobs in my field that I could get. The only psychology job I could even find wanted 10 years of experience, so I had to take whatever job I could get. I ended up working at some funky call center, and I say funky because it really was a complete dumpster fire every single day. The managers had no idea what was going on. My coworkers were some of the weirdest people I'd ever seen. Most of them didn't have a college education either, which made me feel really bad about myself. I had some really low confidence during this time, and I felt like a failure. I still lived with my parents and had a massive amount of student debt, and I was working at a call center making minimum wage. I had also let myself go during the last few months of my senior year in college. I was really stressed out trying to pass. I just didn't have time to make salad or go for runs anymore. I was feeling really down there for a bit, and this is where James comes in. He was a really weird guy that worked at the call center too. He had a goofy-looking mustache and was a bit of a creep. I definitely saw him checking me out a few times, and I even saw him look at other girls too. A little pervy, but I couldn't expect anything less from a place like this that I worked at. Oddly enough, James was the only guy at this place that was ever nice to me. Everyone else was so miserable to be there. James had been hired a couple of weeks before I got the job there, so I guess it just didn't have enough time to make me and James completely miserable yet. There was one time when I went out for a smoke break. James joined me and started flirting with me. He definitely had his problems, but there was something about getting a little bit of attention that did kind of make me feel special. I was always a very introverted person, and I hadn't had a boyfriend in over 2 years. It felt nice to be noticed. It wasn't long before we exchanged numbers and started talking a little bit outside of work. There were a few weeks there that I kept trying to get him to shave his mustache. I told him he would look a lot better. It took about 3 weeks to finally get through to him, but when he did, I was surprised. He was actually a really handsome guy under that caterpillar, and that was when I made up my mind. If he made a move on me, I wasn't going to say no. He never made a move on me, though, and I was surprised because I was sending some pretty strong signals for him to do so. He just never did. Not even over text messages or anything. All he would ever do was flirt. It wasn't very long into that situation that I gave up on him. I figured he didn't like me. I mean, honestly, what else was I supposed to think? I downloaded Tinder like everyone else. I knew my situation was bad, and I secretly fantasized about hooking up with some rich guy. I didn't find a buff millionaire, but I did find a really nice guy eventually. We went on a few dates and started going out together regularly, and I really liked him. We're still together, by the way. But this is where things got weird with James. He started acting differently. He started doing more and more inappropriate things. I was friends with James on Facebook, and when I changed my status to an in a relationship, he did one of those emoji reactions, and he put an angry face. I remember seeing it and rolling my eyes. Typical men, I thought. They don't want you until you have someone else. Now, something James would always do with me is send slightly naked pictures. It wasn't like full frontal or anything like that, but he would take racy photos of himself getting out of the shower or changing and things like that. That was okay when I was single, but he just didn't stop. And these new pics were much more revealing, if you know what I mean. And I kept telling him that I was in a relationship and he couldn't do this anymore. He just wouldn't listen. He always said that he forgot, and I knew he was doing it intentionally. Things also got really awkward at work. There were quite a few things that he would do that were just freaky. For example, pens started disappearing from my desk. I didn't think anything of it at first, just that I was being clumsy. But one day I happened to walk by James's desk and notice all of my pens. He also followed me outside every time I went on a smoke break. He always played it off like he wasn't doing anything, but it was so obvious to everyone. Well, it was around the 6-month mark of me working at that funky call center. I had my performance review and I got a raise. I got an extra $1 an hour, which I was pretty happy about. I had a few $100s in savings and decided to treat myself to my favorite store, Target. I remember making a self-congratulatory post on Facebook about it. I even mentioned that I was going to treat myself to some new sheets from Target. I remember getting comments from some of my friends and former classmates. They all congratulated me, and I was really excited. Sure, I had a stupid job, but I was making the best of my situation. I remember getting to Target at about 6 or 7 on a Friday night. I went alone. I walked into the store and went over to the bedding aisle. I really wanted to pick out the best sheets for me. I am a little OCD about fabric and how things feel, so I was running my hands across the sheets to find the one that I liked the best. That was when something unexpected happened. I felt a kiss on my neck. I had been so wrapped up in feeling sheets that I didn't even notice who was behind me. I immediately thought it was my boyfriend. I mean, who else would randomly kiss me in public, right? Well, you guessed it. It was James. I turned around after he kissed me, and I was smiling. But my giddiness turned to disgust when I saw that it was him. My stomach dropped, and I wanted to scream, but I just couldn't bring myself to do anything. More of me was in shock than anything else. I know I must have looked so repulsed, but that didn't stop him from pinning me up against the aisle rack and continuing to kiss me. He shoved his entire tongue down my throat. It was honestly disgusting. This probably went on for about 3 or 4 seconds before I finally snapped out of it. I pulled my head away and slapped him across the face as hard as I could. I told him that I never wanted to see him again. I fell down onto my back and I just sat there telling him to please leave me alone. He stood there, though, looking down at me, smiling. James was a really freaky guy. He started getting on top of me and kissing me again, and that was when I finally screamed at the top of my lungs. Someone who must have been in an aisle over or two overheard and came running. It was a man who looked like he was in his 30s. He ripped James off of me and threw him against the wall. After that, James took off. The man was really nice to me. He helped me up and made sure I was okay. He asked if I wanted to call the police, and I was so shocked I just told him no in the moment, and that wouldn't be the last time that I saw James. We still work at the same call center, and my God, it's pretty awkward. I know he still creeps on my Facebook, and he looks at me all the time. I'm honestly not sure what to do about it. I haven't even told my boyfriend about what happened, and honestly, I'm kind of afraid to. But I seriously might have to, one of these days. I used to be in a really bad place. I had struggled with mental health issues from the time I was in middle school, mostly depression and anxiety. You know, the usual culprits. I had been working in a Starbucks as a barista. The Starbucks was actually inside of a Target. You would think it would be bad, but it was pretty nice. Anyway, I dated this one guy who may have been an actual sociopath. He had some serious problems. I haven't spoken to him in a few years now, and I don't plan on reaching out anytime soon. Trust me, you'll see why in just a minute. He actually found me out back one day. I was behind the store. I said I was going on break, but I really just needed to go and cry for a little while. I was feeling really overwhelmed and depressed. I just didn't have anything to look forward to in my life at that time. I remember looking up at him. I could barely see him through the tears in my eyes. He started talking to me, and he really comforted me. I told him that I thought about ending my life and was severely depressed. At the time, I thought he was just a really sympathetic person, willing to help someone down on their luck. But now I know the truth. He saw a struggling person who would be easy to abuse, and that's exactly what he did to me. I vividly remember him wiping my tears away, right off of my cheek. I was so touched, and his name was Mike. He really got me. It wasn't long before we had exchanged numbers and started dating. It was really great at first. That honeymoon part of a relationship was so great, but the honeymoon phase doesn't last forever, and when I started to see him for who he really was, I got afraid. I noticed that he wore a mask, and I don't mean like a costume. He would pretend to be someone that he wasn't. He literally faked a personality. There were a few times that I was at his apartment and he would just start acting really weird. It was like his true self came out, and it was horrifying. He was so mean that I honestly can't even put it into words. He really did enjoy making me suffer. I remember him telling me that I wasn't good enough and that I needed to lose weight and read more and work harder and a million other things. He told me everyone in my life thought that I was pathetic. He said so many things like that, and I honestly couldn't stand it. It was like he found that negative voice in the back of my head and put it on speaker. The worst I ever felt about myself was when I was with him, and I totally let it all happen, because no matter how mean he ever was to me, a part of me secretly believed that he would be the only person to ever be with me, that I wasn't worth anyone better than him. Yeah, it was a really dark time. It wasn't too long into our relationship that he convinced me to move in with him. He actually had a nice place, but it was kind of far from my job and my parents. Because of the move, I had to drive almost half an hour one way to Starbucks. Of course he didn't care. He never did about things like that. He gradually isolated me from everyone in my life. He did it one by one. He started with some of my friends, and I might mention that I wasn't very close to them to begin with, but any contact with anyone other than him was a threat, so he would tell me that so-and-so person that I speak to once in a while actually hates me, but sometimes he was more abrasive about it. There was one time when he grabbed my phone right out of my hand and blocked my coworker's phone number. He was really threatening about it too. I knew that if I ever unblocked him, that he might actually do something to me. Things started escalating to the point that even I recognized that they were out of control. I knew if things continued down this path, he was going to kill me or I was going to end up taking my own life. It really was that bad. I won't bore you with every little horrible story, but he broke my stuff, cheated on me. He even joked about the fact that he cheated on me, said I should be happy he's with me at all when there are so many other great women out there, and all kinds of stuff like that. The day I realized that I had to get out was really important. I didn't really have anywhere to go, though. Mike basically forced me to break off contact with everyone, and he regularly checked my phone to make sure I wasn't speaking with someone who I wasn't supposed to. I reached out to my mom while I was at work, borrowed one of my coworkers' phones and gave her a call. It was really nice to hear her voice. I explained as much of the situation as I could, and she said she completely understood and that she was more than happy to let me move back home. That was a really touching moment for me. I walked out that night because Mike was out. I was able to pack my stuff and leave without ever having to say anything. He probably would have gotten me to stay somehow, said the right words, made me feel like everything was going to be okay, the way he always does. He didn't appreciate the fact that I was gone. He was mad. He started showing up at my job a few times a week. He would always try to talk to me, convince me that things could get better. He said that he would change and be nicer to me, but I knew that he was just lying to me. I knew he just wanted me back under his thumb. I ignored everything he said, and that seemed to work for a little while. It didn't stop him. There was no way that I was going with him again. This is where things get crazy, though. He really wanted me back. He showed up at my work one day. I actually happened to be on break. I was walking around Target and just killing time, honestly. As I was walking, I saw him looking through some of the glass near the Starbucks section of the store, and my heart dropped. He looked livid, like really worked up and violently kind of mad. I stopped and just stood there for a moment. I didn't know what to do. He turned around and saw me, and we made eye contact, and the only thing I could think to do was run. My body spun around faster than I ever had before. I ran as fast as I could in the opposite direction, and I knew that he was chasing me. It was actually weird how I got out of the situation. There is an employee door that you need a card key to get through. The Starbucks employees had them too for some reason. I think there was a glitch in the system, but either way, I was far away enough from him that I got through it and closed the door behind me. One of the Target employees asked me if I was okay. As bad as the situation was, I honestly didn't want to make a scene. I told him I was fine and just needed a minute to take a break. I sat there for about 15 minutes and left. Mike was gone, and that was the last time I saw him. I'm not sure why he hasn't contacted me since. I'm just glad he hasn't, though. He was responsible for the worst part of my life, And honestly, I'm lucky to have gotten out of that situation alive. Wherever he is, I just hope he isn't doing the same thing to another poor girl out there. This happened a long time ago. I must have been in middle school. I don't remember exactly what grade, but around that age. I was actually a soccer player, and I was your typical middle school-aged boy at that point in my life. Honestly, I was normal in just about every way you can imagine. I texted girls, played video games, and hung out with my friends. Pretty much my life for that time. Well, there was this one time that my mom brought me to the store. Every once in a while, she would drag me along because she needed the company. You know how parents can be. So we ended up at a strip mall with the most boring stores, as you can imagine. The kinds of places that only a mom would want to spend money. Obviously, I was bored out of my mind. My mom tried to make small talk as we looked through random wall decor, but she could tell that I was really bored. She got kind of frustrated. My mom can be moody like that. I eventually just asked her if I could go explore some of the other stores. She said yes, but that I couldn't spend any of her money. And she knew that I didn't have any of my own, so I was just off to kill some time. This strip mall had 6 or 7 stores and none of them appealed to me, but I was determined to kill that time. I was already annoyed that I had to get dragged out on a Saturday. I thought to myself that the best thing I could do was walk around. I actually had one of those step counters way back then, which I thought was the coolest thing in the world, and my goal was to get that as high as I possibly could. There was a Target nearby, and it was bigger than the other stores, so I figured that there would be more space to walk around. And with that, I was off. I went into the Target and didn't even make an attempt to pretend to look at stuff. I just walked up and down the aisles like a maniac. Thinking back, it must have been a pretty funny sight. When you have someone in a store that is obviously just trying to get their step counter up, it becomes really obvious that they are not shopping. I must have been doing this for about 10 or 15 minutes when an older guy came next to me. He started walking beside me. He told me his name was Larry, and Larry said that he wanted to walk with me. Now, being a naive kid, I didn't think anything of it and said that I would love to have the company. And that was when I started complaining about my mom. Larry began asking a series of questions that should have really raised some serious alarm bells in my head. He asked where exactly she was, how long she would be gone, and things like that. I told him I would probably have to wait for her for another hour or two before she was done shopping. That was when he offered to take me back to his place. He said that he had an Xbox and he only lived 2 minutes away. When he asked me that, I stopped walking. Part of me almost said yes, but then I remembered my parents telling me all about the creepy old men who try to kidnap kids. Stranger danger. The realization hit me like a ton of bricks, and I told him that I wanted to go back and see my mom. He started getting really persistent about taking me for ice cream and then back to his place. I told him I didn't want any ice cream and that my mom was looking for me. That was when he offered me $100 to go with him. I just told him no and started to run away. He followed me outside. He watched me run back into the store that I had last seen my mom. The creepiest look, too. This guy was truly a freak. I got inside the store and ran over to my mom. I started telling her about the creepy man, and she became really concerned. She asked me where he was, and then I told her that he was probably still in the parking lot of Target. We looked outside of the glass windows, and he was looking in. When he saw us look at him, he walked off briskly. My mom went outside to try to get a good look at him or get a license plate, but by that point, he was already gone. We ended up calling the police and filing a report with them. I couldn't tell them very much, though. I wasn't, and I'm still not, a very observant person. The only thing I could remember about him was that he had a collared shirt on and he had no hair, and that his name was supposedly Larry. But that was it. I asked my mom about the case years later. I guess she kept up with it to see if they ever got him. Of course, they didn't. And it really scares me that someone who was possibly willing to abduct a child is just out and about.
It really freaks me out and kind of makes me not want to go out in public very much. But anyway, that was how I was almost abducted in Target when I was in middle school. I thank God every day that I didn't go with him, because I would probably be dead. This story happened to me and my friend. Her name was Jenny. We were in our mid-30s and we're both still single. We're roommates and we both have a really good time. We went to the same college together and have been best friends ever since we met. We have good paying jobs and live actually pretty exciting lives. We actually live in Philadelphia and absolutely love it here. So, me and Jenny have saved up a lot of money over our lives because we don't have any kids and we also didn't have boyfriends at the time. And before you even think it, no, we're not together. We're just very close friends who live our lives the way we want and not the way society tells us. But either way, we love shopping. We work hard so we can buy nice stuff whenever we want. It's kind of how it goes, right? We would always go on Saturday night. That was our secret shopping night. But after the virus, we were pretty much reluctant to go out. We've been working from home and we do everything we can to stay safe and stay indoors. And as you might imagine, it has been extremely difficult. We live in a 2-bedroom apartment in downtown Philadelphia. Our jobs went remote and we felt guilty every time we left the house. It's been a rough little while. We got really excited when things started opening back up, and we hoped and prayed that life would continue as normal. We were both stuck in this tiny apartment and couldn't do anything other than watch TV or read the whole time. It was honestly kind of miserable. But when we officially got out of lockdown, we gave it a few weeks before we went anywhere still. We may have been bored to death, but we also didn't actually want to get sick. There wasn't a massive spike in cases or anything like that, so we figured that it would be okay to go out as long as we wore a mask. We went to all the stores we used to go to. We bought some clothes, perfume, shoes, and other girly things like that. It was honestly super fun. There was nothing like being able to go out and live again, have a good time. Sure, we were a little worried about getting sick, but we thought it would be fine as long as we wore our masks, and at once, to this day, neither of us actually gotten it. But for me and Jenny, the good times left just as quickly as they had come. We were in Target. We were checking out some of the men's sports gear. Jenny's brother had been trying to impress a girl at the gym he goes to, and we were trying to help him out. It was going to be a little something for his birthday. This guy walked up to me and actually tried flirting with me. He was a little abrasive about it too. I mean, here I was standing with my friend looking at clothes, and this guy just invites himself into our little thing right here, and it just rubbed me the wrong way. And this wouldn't be the only thing that would rub me the wrong way. He kept asking me questions about where I worked and stuff like that. He was trying to act like some sort of cool guy, and I thought it was weird because he had to have been in his mid-20s. I don't mean to insult myself, but I definitely look my age. I had at least a decade on him, and it was obvious when he looked at us. Finally, he asked me for my number, and I said I didn't have one. He acted really irritated. He gave me a mean look, and then he said that he saw me using my phone earlier, and this is where things got out of control. He reached into my pocket and pulled my phone out. He started yelling and asking me, "What is this?" I told him to give me my phone back or I was going to call the police. He was obviously mentally ill or something. He finally threw my phone onto the floor and I picked it up. He was really angry and I had half a mind to just kick him in the groin, but I didn't want to have to fight him if I didn't have to. After all, he probably could have really hurt me if he wanted to, and I did my best to be calm, and so did Jenny. He walked away and we thought that was that. We continued browsing through some of the stuff on the racks looking for something that Jenny's brother would like. I found a really nice pair of sweatpants that I thought would make him look really good when Jenny touched me on the shoulder. She told me to look over there. She motioned her hand in the direction, and I looked over and it was the same creepy guy staring at us from the other side of the store. His hand was in his pants and it just looked like the freakiest thing ever. But the way he was standing, it wasn't obvious that his hand was in his pants, if that makes sense. His arm was on the outside of the jacket, and You could only see where his arm was going if you saw the front of him, and we were the only people that could see him. I don't know what he was doing down there, but it wasn't anything that I'd ever seen before. By the way, his arm and body was moving and looked more like he was squeezing one of those stress balls than anything else. I know that might sound funny, but when you and your best friend are both women and standing there watching this, it honestly can really freak you out. I looked over at Jenny and she was so scared that she was crying. That was when I finally had enough sense to speak to one of the managers. I called over for one of the employees and told them what the guy was doing. Of course, when I did, he stopped what he was doing and left the store. I went against my better judgment and didn't call the police at that point. Again, not a very good idea and something I really regret. I've learned my lesson though, and I won't make that mistake again. We gave it another 45 minutes or an hour before we ended up leaving Target. We decided to just kill some time and keep looking for more stuff to get. We finally shut off the bad mood that we were in and got ready to check out. The guy that was working there told us he was really sorry about that and that he would walk us to our car if we wanted. We really appreciate that and took him up on his offer. And there was a decently sized parking lot that we shared between a couple of stores on the road. When me and Jenny stepped out of the Target, we immediately noticed that the guy was still out there. He started walking in our direction once we left the store. He was probably standing there since the time that he had left the store earlier. Thankfully, he darted off when he saw the Target employee with us. He was a bigger guy and looked like he worked out a lot. He told us that he would call the cops and let them know about this guy after we left. We thanked him a ton. I even handed him a $50 tip for being just such a good guy about the whole situation. After all, he didn't get paid to watch out for our safety, and I really appreciated that. Jenny and I drove home and got there safely. And that was the end of our story with that creepy guy. I'm really appreciative of that Target employee and other people like him. Sometimes the only thing standing between you and a predator is a selfless stranger looking out for your safety. This is hands down the scariest experience in my life. I was out driving with two of my best friends. It was one of those wonderful summer nights where we just wanted to have some fun. We had just gotten out of the movie theater and wanted to enjoy a drive around our area. We live in a very rural area, and sometimes it's nice to just drive around and see what's here. Well, it's pretty dark and everything, but we were having a good time anyway. It had to have been about 9 o'clock at night. We were blasting music and laughing and everything, but there was a car that started following us. They weren't tailgating us or anything. They just followed us for a really long time. One of my best friends pointed out to me, and I hadn't even noticed it. I asked her how long it was behind us, and she said at least for 10 minutes. I wasn't exactly sure what to do. We were pretty far out in the middle of nowhere. I remember learning about this little trick a couple of years ago. If you think someone is following you, you can take it 4 turns in the same direction, and if they're still behind you, they're definitely following you. There weren't very many turns out there, but every single turn I took, there was this car. By the time I made my 3rd turn, I started getting really uneasy. I thought that we may have been in real danger, and the mood died from there. We turned the music off, and instead of laughing, we were sitting there in dead silence. We all started freaking out a little bit more when I made that 4th turn. He was still behind us. Like I said, he wasn't tailgating us or anything. It wasn't even very close, but he was close enough to keep an eye on us. I tried getting my friends to call the police, but we were out of range of any cell phone service. I was completely at a loss for what to do there. I was scared out of my mind. My friend came up with the best idea. We could just go to the nearest store or whatever, and hopefully the people there would help us if the person kept following us. Well, none of us knew where any stores were nearby. The closest one we could think of was a Target near town, but that had to have been at least 30 minutes away. We couldn't think of anything else to do, though, so that was the plan. Drive to Target. There was no way on earth I could ever describe to you the situation. It was the most horrifying thing in my life. Not only because I thought I was going to die, but because I had no idea what to do when it went on for so long. 30 minutes is a lifetime when you think that a potential murderer is right behind you. I sincerely hope you never have to experience it. You get more tense and anxious with every passing moment. It may have felt that it had taken a lifetime, but eventually we got there. Target was pretty crowded too, which we were thankful for, and this was our plan. I was going to park my car right in front of Target, and we were all going to run out and run into the store. We just hoped that someone would help us by that point, or better yet, this guy would leave and not want to make a big scene. I don't know why we didn't think to call the police. By the way, we definitely would have had service, but the whole situation was a way of stopping you from thinking clearly. I parked my car right in front of the Target, and we all ran in just like we were planning to do. We asked for our manager when we came across the first employee we saw. We told him that we were being chased. When the manager got there, he believed us and brought us to the employees section of the store. He called the police for us and helped us out. Thankfully, the guy from the car didn't come in. At least, we didn't think he did. We don't really know what he would have looked like, and by that point, none of us were watching the car when we pulled into the parking lot. When the cops got there, it was really late. It took them almost 20 entire minutes to get there, which I thought was a little slow. And then when they did show up, they treated us like we were crazy. One of the cops thought that we were just making the whole situation up for attention, and that really made my friend angry, and I had to stop her from getting up in his face. The manager was really understanding. He let us have drinks from the vending machine and asked if we wanted a ride home. I thanked him and told him that I was going to drive my friends back home. I don't know who was in the car, and I don't know why they were following us. I just know that I never want to be in a situation like that ever again, and I hope you never have to understand how terrifying it can be. I was a manager at Target and had a horrible experience with a customer one time. I always found the situation very strange. For the most part, the customers are very pleasant and not at all bad in comparison in some places. I have worked with the public my entire adult life, and people can be absolutely horrible sometimes, but they are a little bit better at Target. In the few years I've worked there, I never once had to call security or physically escort someone off the premises. I only once ever had to call the police on someone, and I would actually make the case that he was only a target to creep on girls, so I'm not even sure that that really counts. But anyways, I digress. My story with that guy was actually really interesting, and I feel a weird combination of anger and sympathy for this one kid. He must have been about 19 or 20 years old, really tall, one of the weirdest looking kids I've ever seen, and I don't mean that in a judgmental way or anything. He was just really strange looking. It probably made life for him really difficult, so I can at least understand where he was coming from when he did what he did. Absolutely does not justify it or anything, but I can understand him at least, if that makes sense. It all started on an usual afternoon. I had just gotten off the phone with corporate, and if you're wondering, yes, it's always a nightmare. I was looking forward to doing some inventory checks and whatnot for the day. The store has been awfully busy that week. I had a customer who wanted to speak with me. I went out to talk with her, and she told me about an employee who had been inappropriate with her. I guess one of our people was helping her decide on clothes and was standing a little too close to the dressing room door. Honestly, she struck me as a drama queen. I just kind of brushed it off and told her that we would look into it and make sure our employees don't do anything like that again. But when you're a manager, you hear complaints like that all the time, and a good chunk of them are just from people who want to get a free item or discount or something. I got another complaint that day from another customer. This one made me a little bit more intrigued. It was from someone who looked like she came from a wealthy home. Probably not looking for a handout here. She said that one of the employees had felt her while she was looking at clothes. Now, that set off some alarm bells, because that meant that one of my workers was physically creeping on customers on the job. I told her I would look into it, and I called the meeting before everyone went home. I explained the situation and said that whoever was responsible could come to my office and have a chat with me. I would go easy with them if they admitted to it without forcing me to look into it. My personal philosophy is that people know when they do wrong, and they just want an opportunity to right their wrongs, so I try to give it to them. But everyone went home. No one admitted anything. And that was when it was on. We couldn't look at the security camera footage in the area because all of this had been going down near the dressing rooms. The closest security camera we have is on the outside rack of the clothes, but it doesn't give us very much indication of what's going on near the dressing rooms. I asked one of my favorite employees to keep an eye on that area over there. He told me he would. 2 days went by and he didn't see anything. I didn't get any more complaints either. Very strange. Of course, it wasn't long before we had another complaint. I asked the woman what this employee looked like. She forgot the name on the tag, but told me that it was a tall, skinny guy with weird-looking glasses. And right off the bat, I knew it wasn't anyone on my team. We didn't have a skinny guy with glasses. And immediately, I knew that we were dealing with someone that was pretending to be an employee. I gave a heads up to my team and had everyone on the lookout. I remember getting a text message from one of my female team members. She told me that she spotted someone that looked like that over by the clothing section. I immediately went over to look around, but before I did, I made sure to put on my jacket around my uniform. That way it wouldn't be obvious that I was the manager looking to bust this guy. I spotted him. This kid stuck out like a sore thumb. At first, I was worried that I would be dealing with some middle-aged creep. I felt kind of bad when I realized that this was some high school or college kid being a weirdo. He was wearing what looked like a Target uniform. If you looked closely enough, you could tell it was fake. But I guess the average customer doesn't really know the difference. I walked over to him and asked to see him in my office. The look of terror on his face washed over him in that moment was unforgettable. He wasn't trying to run or anything, and I brought him in and sat him down. From what I could tell, he was an otherwise good kid. He was going to the local community college, had good grades, went to church, the whole 9 yards. I asked him why he was doing this, and he said it was because no girls in his college would date him. I tried explaining to him that being a creep to strangers by impersonating a Target employee is not the answer. I told him that I could call the police and have him arrested for what he was doing. I told him I wouldn't, though. I know having something like that on your record can really mess your life up, and I wanted to give him the benefit of the doubt. After all, he hadn't done anything horribly bad in the store. He seemed like he got the memo. Well, he didn't, though. Must have been 2 or 3 months later that I got another report about something like that. Apparently this woman was looking for a new sweater and a Target employee kissed her on the cheek. My mind jumped to the only thing I could think of, and I called the police. I was willing to give him the benefit of the doubt, but he had dug his own hole here. He was in the same area doing the same thing as before. I don't know what happened to him after the fact, but what I can tell you is that one of the cops recognized him. I guess this wasn't the only time he was being a creep in a clothing store pretending to be an employee. But other than that one weird kid, the people at Target are very okay people. Hey friends, thanks for listening. Click that notification bell to be alerted of all future narrations. If you got a story, be sure to submit them to my subreddit, r/letsreadofficial, and give and receive feedback from the community, and maybe even hear your story featured on the next video. And join my Discord to interact with me and other listeners directly. And if you want to support me even more, grab early access to all future narrations for just $1 a month on Patreon, and maybe even pick yourself up some Let's Read merch on Spreadshirt. And check out the Let's Read podcast, where you can hear all these stories in long compilation form and save huge on data, located anywhere you listen to podcasts. Links in the bio. Thanks so much, friends. And remember to always shut your cornhole and eat your vegetables.